with the prime sponsor and the other side of the aisle, Representative Mossbrucker. We had our Steve Dills on the line, who's a K-9 person. And I think, James, there were at least 3 others, maybe 4 other K-9 folks. And basically that was a really good negotiation session. And I think my impression, even though not in the room and being able to see, body language, pardon the pun, but it was, I think the members really had their eyes opened on the positive uses and the positive aspects, and the positive public safety implications of K-9s. So out of those discussions came a bill that removed the section of the bill that prohibited K-9s, and instead inserted, and I'm going to try to see if I can't sit here and pull it up, but instead inserted a study group that's going to work on the K-9 issue over this coming interim, and make recommendations to the legislature and the CJTC on the use of K-9s. So that we think, is a win. And it's, I think, really good that the legislature really took a hard look, at some really good points that some law enforcement officers made as it relayed, to K-9s. So I think it was a good result. James, you want to add anything on that?
Actually, I got the live stream to work. So for the last 5 minutes, you've been live streaming. That being said,
okay.
You're right. No, it's all good. That being said, again, this is one of those good things that happened this week. We were able to find some common ground on K-9s. And we look forward to working with all interested parties at the CJTC to come up with a model policy for the use of K-9s that will hopefully be incorporated into the certification process for K-9s. So as Michael said, we had our state secretary, who's also been a K-9 for several years and now is the supervisor of the K-9s at the Skagit County Sheriff's Department. He did a phenomenal job during the meeting. And so as we move forward, the FOP is going to be at the table, and we're going to make sure that we try and not have to deal with this topic in future legislative sessions. So.
All right. Right on. I'll go on to the next bill, House Bill 1202, and this is the civil cause of action bill. Representative Ty is the sponsor, and we've been working with her. That, like the bill I mentioned up above, is in appropriations and awaiting action for appropriations. As I think I've mentioned before, we still have a couple of amendments we're going to continue to work with Representative Ty on. Specifically, we'd like to make it so that a prevailing party has the ability to recover attorney's fees, not just a prevailing plaintiff. We just think it's really important to, if a law enforcement officer a peace officer does have to defend themselves and they are successful in that defense, that's basically what's good for a plaintiff's lawyer ought to also be good for a defense lawyer. So we're going to continue to push that as the bill gets heard in appropriations and moves through the remainder of the House. Anything to add on that one, Mr. Shrimpshire?
Nope. You're hitting all the right notes, man.
Okay. Right on. So House Bill 1203, Community Oversight Boards, a bill that we continue to struggle with, not necessarily in the vesting of community oversight boards with, kind of policy making and policy oversight duties, maybe too strong of a word, but authorities. This bill takes that a little too far and does a couple of things. gives the Community Oversight Board some investigative and some subpoena power over use of force scenes. And it also, interestingly, gives the Community Oversight Boards a budget of a minimum of 5% of the law enforcement agency's budget at the time. So we're going to continue to push to have those latter sections removed from the bill. Again, there's no concerns from our standpoint on, having those community oversight boards participate in the policymaking side of the House, but giving them, administrative and investigative powers from our standpoint just is a bridge too far and creates a lot of, administrative and oversight concerns within agencies. So we're going to try to hold the line on that on community oversight boards. The other thing I'll mention is Senator Conway introduced a bill this week, Senate Bill 5353, and that's an effort to a bill to provide some grants for communities and law enforcement agencies to build bridges and communicate and create relationships. The program that was stood up in this hearing was the Safe Streets program, specifically the one in Tacoma, and their work that they do with law enforcement agencies. I testified in favor of that bill, but I also mentioned that rather than have a separate pathway for community engagement with their law enforcement agency and their peace officers, that maybe including that grant process and that grant idea in the Community Oversight Board bill may be able to put two really good positive things in one place rather than have two separate tracks. So any discussion on community oversight boards, James, that I missed?
So just something very similar along the same topic, and that is the bill that made it out of the House today and is over to the Senate, which is 1001, which provides grants to diversify police departments. It's some small grant money. This was a bipartisan bill. Representative Lovick and Representative Maycumber, Democrat and Republican. It made it out of the House. Very, very few no votes. This is something that we've also supported. We think this is great to provide grants to local departments to increase their ranks and those ranks be a little bit more diverse. So it's something I didn't put it on the agenda today, but it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, and I would just note that had no votes moving off the House floor. It passed out 98-0. So what needs to occur with that is it needs to get funded. So one of the things that in addition to helping the policy bills move through the process, once the budget discussions start in earnest, we need to be at that table as well, making certain that the policy bills and policy legislation that we have move forward is funded in the budget, because it's great to have one piece of the pie on the policy side, but at the end of the day, the legislature has got to come up with the dough to fund things like this. And a couple of things I'm going to mention and fund a lot of other things like a statewide independent investigations office, potentially a statewide independent prosecutor office, and many things in the Criminal Justice Training Commission as well. And then add on to that, the data bill that we talked about earlier is another cost that we're going to want to maintain. We're going to want to continue to maintain in the budgets as they go along. So, okay, next item on our agenda, House Bill 1267, the Office of Independent Investigations. This is a bill that came out of the governor's task force. It passed out of the Public Safety Committee, I think late 2 weeks ago, and is in appropriations. I believe passed out on a party line vote. And sits in appropriations again, waiting for the budget folks to decide how much and to what extent to fund it. I think the original fiscal note for creating and standing up this office wasn't insignificant, and I think the number was somewhere in the $1 million. Golly sakes, $1 million at least for one department, and I don't think any of the other state agency departments were added. But this was, upwards of $1 million in just to stand up the agency. $3.4 million in the next and first half of the biennium, and like $9.8 million in the second half. Some forensic analysis was a couple of $1 million. So, I mean, it was a lot of money. And then the number I want to come out with at the end was somewhere around the $29 million range. And it was everybody from the gambling commission to others. So not double negative, not inexpensive. But it's something that the budget writers are definitely going to have to struggle with and decide how much and to what extent to fund it. Be a lot more to come on that in the next few weeks as the next revenue forecast comes out in the kind of the middle part of March. And that's when budget discussions will begin in the legislature in earnest. The one bill I do want to tie into 167, that's skipped one bill, is House Bill 1507. And that's the independent statewide prosecution bill. It has a hearing in the House Public Safety Committee on Monday. We're going to testify as either pro with concerns or other, and speak mostly pro. There's some good stuff in this bill, but there's also a piece in there that allows the local prosecuting attorney some discretion as to whether or not there's a conflict of interest in a particular use of deadly force case. And as we went through the Independent Investigation Reform Task Force, we have always been of the opinion and do believe that local prosecutors ought not to be in the charging position on officer use of force matters. We think there's an inherent conflict of interest. And we think that having it at the state level will insert a needed and necessary degree of consistency around the state. We think that it takes the local prosecutor out of it, which we think helps the relationship between the community groups and law enforcement generally, and peace officers particularly in local communities, because those are the things, as everybody knows, that can really get folks charged up at the local level. And having that statewide something look and review all of that, we think does a lot of good things, like I just mentioned, including increasing transparency in the process. There's still some concerns about having an independent prosecutor housed in the Attorney General's office. We're exploring some ways to maybe make that a Solicitor General, more independent type office within the Attorney General. So that's an idea we'll toss out there and see if we can get to a place where we can get a truly statewide independent prosecutor. And we're going to keep working as this bill moves forward to that end. And lastly, on these two bills, the reason I mentioned them together is the governor's task force made both of those recommendations. As I mentioned, both on the statewide independent investigation teams and the statewide independent prosecutor. We think that those two policy changes and department establishments need to go together. And really, if we'd have had our druthers, those two ideas would have been put forth in one bill, so they would travel together, be attached at the hip, for lack of a better way of putting it, so that they would rise and fall together, because we think they are so important to have one stood up without the other just isn't getting all the way the best you can to a good answer to the problem. So with that, I'll finally mention on 1507, we did ask both sides of the aisle from a procedural standpoint. It's very rare that a bill gets heard and passed out in the same day, and it has to, if that occurs, it has to be unanimous consent by both the House side and the Republican side of the committee. And in an effort to keep this bill moving and to keep the discussions open and the ability to marry those two concepts, we've asked both sides of the aisle to waive the rule and hear it and vote it out of committee on Monday. So with that, James, I'll shut up and see if you want to add anything that I missed.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Michael. And one of the reasons we believe the two bills should be together is we don't want to be back here having to deal with this subject matter. If this is the road we're going to go, let's do it right the first time. So at the end of the day, consistency for us, if we had to deal with one investigative body and one prosecutor for all OISs in the state, think about the consistency there as far as having to defend our members, with the attorneys, the feedback from them, they would prefer that. So because the way things are handled in one prosecutor's office is different than another prosecutor's office. So hold on, we got a question. Is there any concern over politics being a factor if this is handled by the AG's office?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And that's one of the ideas that that's why so two things. The idea of a solicitor general office within the attorney general's office is one idea. And there was some legal analysis that the task force had done by a Seattle law firm, KL Gates, and I need to go back and review that legal stuff. There was a legal way to kind of make that separation legally in statute between the Attorney General's office and this entity, and so we're going to go back and examine that. But the short answer to the question is yes.
So, and then on the qualified immunity, was there any discussion about some kind of monetary cap to Colorado in regards to it? So I'm just going to address that head on. That means we concede. If we're just saying, hey, just put a cap on it, that means we're okay with it. So I'm not ready to concede yet. I know Michael, I've worked with him long enough. He's not ready to concede yet. But if that's, I get this question daily. And so I believe I'm working on issues until we can't work on them anymore. And so just going the route of putting a cap on something means we're okay with it and let us have it. So again.
And I want to be clear, we're talking about a cap on what, so there's two different kinds of caps. One is a cap that an officer would be required to pay out in anything, and the other one is a cap on what the law enforcement, the peace officers agency would pay out. And I'm happy not to have the other in the bill right now.
Exactly. And the other thing I'll say, let me be clear. This is called a qualified immunity bill. There is no qualified immunity in Washington state. There never has been. This sets up a mechanism for qualified or to circumvent qualified immunity, which is a defense to a 1983 action or a federal civil lawsuit.
Right.
So be very clear. They're just trying to create some kind of mechanism so that cases like a civil lawsuit don't go to federal court, they go to state court. So
it would be the same process that can happen now in federal court and state court. So right. It does, from that standpoint, it provides a state cause of action. But the other things that are in that bill are even are more important. And those items are officers get a defense. if they were complying with their training, their policy, or at the direction of a supervisor or their department. And if they followed
It's not even full compliance. It says generally
substantially
comply.
complied.
Yeah, yeah. And so I want to be very clear. I get this cap question, and I hope that people are listening. Feel free to continue to talk to me because I love being engaged with our members. But know this: when you see me say, "Okay, let's just put a cap on it," then we've given up, and I'm not ready to give up yet. I believe in working on an issue till we can't work on it no more, and we're not to that point on this bill. Pure and simple.
Yeah. It's in a good, I think that bill's in a reasonable spot. And it holds the employers liable. I mean, this is good. I think there's some good stuff in that bill. All right, last bill I'm going to mention, and James, I'm going to give you the con on this one, is House Bill 1499. And this is a bill sponsored by Representative Lauren Davis to decriminalize the possession of personal use amounts of various drugs and narcotics. And James, I'll let you talk a little bit more about it. And I'm going to pull up the bill and let you know the types of things that are in there.
So 1499 was introduced yesterday, second day before cutoff. We have today and Monday, or yesterday and Monday, and it is mirrored exactly after the Oregon bill. And basically, they want to take a public health approach to low-level drug crimes or user possession drug crimes. However, what really concerns me, and he's pulling, Michael's pulling up the bill right now. When I read the intent section, I just see a lot of not unintended consequences. It's pretty clear where they want to go, where they just want law enforcement out of the world. You know, this is one of those bills. Somebody put it to me very nicely about how these bills are drafted in a vacuum, and that is correct. I was also, and me being the person for this organization that reaches out to the community groups and maintains that bridge, it's not all of the community groups are on board with this, and only a few of them, and the ones that are really are agenda driven. And don't be surprised if you see this, if it doesn't make it through the legislature in the form of an initiative over the summer. They really think that this is the right approach. The representative, I really appreciate it. Now, if they want to talk about, and there is some discussion about this on the Republican side, if they want to talk about creating secure facilities, drug rehabilitation facilities, and using those as a diversion for user level drug crimes and taking some of the pressure off the courts, then that's a conversation we can have. But totally decriminalizing them, no, you still need that care, that thing standing over their head to get them into those secure facilities where they can focus on the rehabilitation and their treatment. Again, I think in this day and age, we all understand that, the war on drugs is over, right? And that, but our concern, as it should be, is the residual crimes that go along with user, everybody knows that's going to listen to this or is listening to this now. Your burglars aren't committing crimes to committing a burglary to feed their family. They're committing crimes to feed their habit. The guy robbing the liquor store, same thing. Those kind of crimes and those residual crimes are directly impact public safety. And I'm sorry if I sound a little strong on this. It's just, hey, this is a bridge too far. And if we want to have, and I told them, let's have further conversation. Let's talk about setting up, facilities and put the infrastructure in place, but never decriminalize. If they were to take the decriminalization out of her bill, it'd be a great bill for the FOP. But having that decriminalization part in there just doesn't fit in the equation for us. And besides that, it puts our mental health professionals in a tight spot, less safe, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And it's just, it wasn't well thought out. It's more agenda driven. And I I want to have those conversations with Representative Davis. I really do. I think we could come up with something, could have come up with some common ground, but this is not it.
And there you have it. This is really broad based. It creates a substance use disorder statewide program, and then creates a board to determine what the appropriate personal use possession amounts should be statewide. So, and it's quite the piece of legislation. And it's funded by, I think it's funded by lawsuits against opioid manufacturers. Okay. All right, James, that is everything on our agenda today.
Got one more thing, because after the meeting, I got a few phone calls about the bill to require audio and video recording on all custodial interrogations
Oh,
on
yeah.
certain types.
House
So that
Bill
bill
1223.
passed. Yeah, that bill passed out of committee. Again, we're going to stand behind our support for it. Simply put, hey, your agencies owe it to you to get you a body cam. I understand, and I will get the phone calls again. Well, my administration says we're going to have to add people just to take care of the public disclosure. I heard it. I can tell you, I implemented a body cam program at my department 10 months ago, and the public disclosure part, once you implement it and you do it the right way and you invest on the front end, is not overburdened. There are also studies out there that have been paid for by Axon, DOJ, that simply address the public disclosure issue. And the one paid for by Axon was with the city of Kent. They had over 190 cameras, and those camera and the public disclosure, quite frankly, they added one person, and it wasn't taxing at all, is what the study's going to show you. And so I understand, but those old arguments, who's going to store the data, who's going to do this, hey, unfunded mandate, I get it. I totally get it. And that's why we are working with a certain senator to come up with a funding mechanism for body cameras. We don't know if we'll be able to get it done this year, but it's definitely on the FOP radar. Every FOP member, every law enforcement member needs a body cam. I mean, we need to tell our story, right? And that's the way we do it. So I'm sorry to get on my soapbox, but it is what it is. And I think it's the right way to go.
All right, and I'll add one other thing I'll talk about real quickly. So James and I had an opportunity this morning to spend a little bit of time on a Zoom call with our legislator of the year, John Lovick. And we talked through a lot of these issues with John, and some of this stuff he can help us with, and some of this stuff, we just kind of need to see it play out as the session moves through. So, but really good discussion this morning, and in particular, he's going to help us on House Bill 1088, which is his Brady impeachment bill that we think needs a little bit more work. It passed out of the House and is over in the Senate Law and Justice Committee, but he's definitely willing to work with us on that bill. And he's going to be, I think, really helpful. As everybody may or may not know, he's really high in leadership in the House. I think he's going to be really helpful for us on getting the money that we need to fully fund a robust data collection system that we can't let go and get funded on the cheap. So really good discussion this morning. Always great to, kind of spend some time with John, and again, talk with our legislator of the year a little bit, and check in with him. So, all right, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, so before we go around the room, just to give you guys a little glimpse of, Michael and I, and Michael more specifically, this is during the legislative session. This is almost a 16 7-day a week, 16 hours, 7 days a week operation. Like he said, this morning we were on the phone. Tomorrow we'll be on the phone. So this Michael, I want to thank you. You put in a lot of hard work for this organization, and I really appreciate it. And I just want our members to know that, hey, this is not a 9 to 5 job. This is 4 o'clock and 4:30 in the morning to probably 8 at night. We're communicating and having meetings, and I do it because I believe that the future of this organization, revolves around making sure that we get good policy in place that protects our members, and gives them a good place to work and serves the communities that we represent. So that being said, Holt, I'm glad you're on here today. You got anything from the east side?
Nope. Thank you for the updates, guys. Appreciate it.
Leah, you got anything from down there?
No, sir.
Okay. Jeremy, feel free, if you got a mic, speak up.
I don't have anything further, but I was going to say that if there's something more that can be done at our local level, do let us know.
Who are your legislators, Jeremy?
Sorry, say that again.
Who are your legislators?
Actually, John Levick, April Berg, and then Steve Hobbs.
That's good to know.
Perfect. All right. Stuck in Nashville. I will see you tomorrow at the airport.
Yes, you will. See us tomorrow.
Can we get out of here?
Roski wants to know if we can get out of here.
Yeah. All right.
Take care, everybody.
Like a foot of snow at SeaTac. All right. I'll see everybody. This will be on YouTube in a little bit. Thanks.
Get that cleared up.
Yeah.
Is there any break in the weather tomorrow?